Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today we're really digging into Doctors Without Borders. Well, technically Médecins Sans Frontières, or MSF, but you know them, right?
Everyone's heard of Doctors Without Borders.
And their incredible work, obviously. But we're going beyond their missions today.
Oh, right to the nitty-gritty.
Exactly. You sent in this sociology thesis all about employee satisfaction within MSF. And let me tell you, gets surprisingly complex.
It really makes you rethink some assumptions, yeah. We see the life-saving work, but this research, it gets into the heads of the aid workers themselves.
Their motivations, what they struggle with.
Even their dissatisfaction, which is kind of taboo to talk about, right?
Exactly,
Yeah.
which is why it's fascinating. So first off, get the thesis starts by talking about ancient philosophers to set the stage. Talk about a curveball.
Bit of a head-scratcher at first, right? But it's highlighting this huge shift in how we view work itself. Like, way back when, work was just survival, right? Bring home the bacon.
Now we want it to be meaningful, fulfilling.
Exactly. And that expectation, it bleeds into every field, but especially nonprofits.
Oh, absolutely. Like if you're in international aid, there's this pressure to be all in, right?
Totally. Like, are you even really helping if you're not giving your whole heart and soul to the cause?
Which I can see how that would be a heavy expectation.
And that's the core tension, how those ideals clash with how aid work actually is. And MSF's a great case study because, well, the scale of it is massive. We're talking
468 projects in 71 countries. I can't even fathom.
in 2018 alone, that's earthquakes, epidemics, long-term health crises like tuberculosis, malnutrition, you name it.
And the teams to handle all that.
Nearly 40,000 staff from 139 different countries, all these backgrounds, experiences.
That's mind-boggling. But with that global reach, how do you even start measuring something like employee satisfaction? Seems incredibly complex.
Right. It'd be easy to just focus on the numbers, but this research, it's saying, hold on, let's look at the people behind those numbers. Those aid workers putting themselves out there. It's not a simple equation.
It's like we often forget there's a human cost to this kind of work, right? Like, they're heroes, so they must be immune to the toll it takes.
Exactly. And this thesis unpacks that. These individuals, so driven, they're navigating intense environments, complex power dynamics, constant pressure to make a difference that weighs on someone.
Absolutely. And you used this phrase earlier, the thesis kept using insatisfaction. What's the deal with the parentheses?
Yeah. The author's making a point. It's not just satisfaction, not just dissatisfaction. It's both at the same time. You can love MSF's mission, find the work fulfilling, but still.
Hate those walls.
Exactly. Frustration, disillusionment, even anger sometimes. It's acknowledging the whole picture.
Makes sense. So what are some of the sources of that insatisfaction?
Yeah.
Well, what's the thesis saying?
A few things come up. Sometimes it's unclear roles within MSF, or conflicting expectations. Headquarters wants one thing, field teams face a different reality.
Oh, and the pressure. You're dealing with life or death situations, limited resources.
Intense is an understatement. And speaking of conflicting expectations, the thesis opens with a story about an Italian doctor, Nino, in Haiti after Hurricane Matthew.
Right. He went in ready to use his skills. Then what happened?
So at first, MSF's providing care to everyone affected by the hurricane. Makes sense, right? But resources are stretched thin.
Always the case in those situations.
So they have to make a tough call. They shift focus to prioritize children under 5.
Heartbreaking, but I get the logic.
Still, huge ethical dilemma, right? And for Nino, it meant he couldn't use his skills as he'd planned. He felt sidelined, powerless almost.
And that fed into the insatisfaction. Because it's one thing to believe in the overall mission.
But when your day-to-day doesn't reflect that, or you're forced into these impossible choices, that takes a toll.
It's like the thesis is saying, hey, praising aid workers isn't enough. MSF, these organizations, they need to support their people, manage those internal pressures too.
100%. And that's where it gets even more interesting. See, a lot of research on aid work, it blames burnout, PTSD, which are valid. But this thesis says it's more complex than that.
So while trauma plays a part, it's not the whole story.
Right. This research is arguing it's this interplay. Someone's personal reasons for joining MSF, what they thought it'd be like, versus the reality of working within a huge, sometimes bureaucratic organization. It's a lot to unpack.
Okay, so we're talking about those personal reasons, someone's motivation for joining an organization like Doctors Without Borders. It's got to be more than just helping people, right? That's too simple.
Way more to it. And that's where this thesis gets insightful. It connects those motivations to the insatisfaction we've been unpacking. Like whether an aid worker thrives in MSF or struggles, it's often tied to why they joined up in the first place.
So it's not enough to be passionate about the cause. There needs to be this alignment.
Right. It's a spectrum. Yeah. You've got folks on one end super driven by alleviating suffering. Like that's their core. Empathy, moral obligation, almost a calling to be on the front lines.
That's the classic image of MSF, yeah. Self-heroes.
But then you've got others equally drawn to MSF, but they're more motivated by personal growth, the adventure, using their skills in tough situations, that intense learning experience.
So it's less about the other and more about finding yourself even within aid work.
That's valid.
Right,
Yeah.
totally.
And the thesis isn't saying it's bad. These folks bring tons to the table, but they might be quicker to hit that insatisfaction if they feel stifled or face dilemmas that challenge their worldview.
It's like your initial reasons for being there have to mesh with the reality on the ground. Otherwise.
Friction. And here's the thing, MSF's workforce, it's getting even more diverse. Not just nationalities, but those underlying motivations too.
We talked about that 139 countries now. So more diversity, more potential for insatisfaction. Is that what this thesis is suggesting?
Seems like it. Think about it as more and more aid workers come from the global south, places that have received aid. That brings valuable new perspectives, but also potential clashes.
Oh, absolutely. Like someone who's experienced the receiving end of aid might have a very different take on how MSF operates, right? The power dynamics.
Exactly. It challenges MSF's internal culture too. It's not just about delivering aid anymore. It's about how you do it, who gets a say.
That adds a whole nother level. It's like MSS growing, becoming a reflection of the complex world it works in. And that comes with some growing pains.
And that's why I think this research is so important. It's not about criticizing, it's about understanding. Aid work's changing, the people doing it are changing.
And we need to pay attention to that insatisfaction because it's telling us something.
It's a chance for growth, both for individuals and for organizations like MSF.
This whole deep dive, honestly, eye-opening. We've gone from ancient philosophers to the nitty-gritty of aid work today, and I'm seeing it all differently.
It's easy to simplify, right? But even with the best intentions, the human element always complicates things.
And ignoring that does everyone a disservice. So listeners, here's something to chew on. How do we better support the people in these tough, often thankless, but absolutely vital professions? Something to think about. Until next time on The Deep Dive.